Being aware of the metadata requirements for the Biodiversity Heritage Library is an important first step when considering becoming a contributor. While the Expanding Access project is committed to working with whatever form of metadata you have, being able to provide the usually required form of metadata will expedite the process of getting your content into BHL. The goal of this video is to guide you through the process of providing accurate and complete metadata for every item added to the collection. This diagram describes an overview of the BHL Digitization Workflow. Metadata is a critical requirement of making the books and volumes in BHL searchable and findable by users of our website. As shown in the diagram, metadata is paired with the image files and sent to the Internet Archive, or IA. The Biodiversity Heritage Library then harvests the metadata from IA and indexes it within its own database. BHL requires that its contributors provide the most accurate and complete metadata possible to maintain the quality of our collection. A single item in BHL is considered a cover-to-cover unit that is digitized, regardless of the file format. For each item digitized, we require 3 parts of metadata. This is the breakdown of the general formula for a single digital book or volume in BHL. BHL requires 3 levels of metadata: title level metadata, which is grabbed from the MARCXML file, plus the item or volume level metadata, and finally metadata for each page. If you are digitizing with your own in-house equipment or sending materials to a digitization vendor that is not the Internet Archive, you will need to use software known as MACA to help you enter these 3 levels of metadata. MACA requires that you upload a MARCXML file. It also requires you to manually enter item metadata, as well as metadata for each page. If you work directly with the Internet Archive, IA collects the MARC records, title level metadata, directly from your library catalog via the Z3950 fetch. IA requires that you submit item level metadata in the form of a spreadsheet known as the Partner Meta App. IA will enter the page level metadata for you. For the Expanding Access project, we are looking at alternatives for title level metadata, as not all contributors will be able to use the Z3950 protocol. MARCXML is the file format required to supply the information from the bibliographic record. Bibliographic records, or BIB records, contain title-level metadata, including title, author, dates of publication, subject headings, etc. Your integrated library system may be able to export MARCXML directly, or you may be able to export MARC and convert it to MARCXML. If you need to perform a conversion from the file format exported from your catalog system to MARCXML, we highly recommend the MARC Edit tool. So as long as you have a MARC record, it can be converted into MARCXML. If you are part of the Expanding Access project and do not have MARC records available, we will cover the alternative strategies later. BHL has metadata requirements described in detail in our documentation. It is your responsibility as a contributor to review the documentation and comply with our requirements as much as possible. This example shows some of the MARC fields that are required, such as the MARC 245 or title, and one of the 100 fields that contain a name or uniform title heading used as a main entry. The BHL database stores information from the MARC fields to help users search by title and author or corporate name, for example, via our website. Please read the latest documentation to get more information about required fields. This is how the bibliographic record metadata is displayed in the BHL interface. The information you see here is pulled directly from the MARC record. Books and journals are presented differently in BHL. For monographs, there is one title record for one item. Since there is just one item associated with a book title, you will see these metadata fields in the corresponding information if you view this item in BHL. For journals, one title record is still used for all of the different volumes. However, the item metadata and page metadata differs. If you view this item in BHL, you can see how these different metadata fields are presented and how data can vary within those fields. MARCXML is required to submit content to the BHL collection. Even archival materials must be cataloged in MARC to be included in BHL. Our data model depends upon the presence of MARCXML to display and index materials through our website. Materials cannot be submitted to BHL without MARCXML. If you do not have MARC records available, you have the following strategies. First, check to see if there is a catalog record for the same item in WorldCat or from a BHL institution. If there is not a catalog record in either of those locations and you are part of the Expanding Access project, please contact Mariah Lewis at mlewis@nybg.org to work on finding the proper way to convert metadata or create MARC records. If it is archival material, there is a workflow in place from the Fieldbook project that can be used. The second part of the required metadata is item metadata. Unlike title metadata, each individual item gets its own item-specific item-level metadata. This is an example of the various pieces of information we need to describe an item or volume in our collection. For every item in BHL, we need to understand who is contributing the item to BHL, or the contributor field, and who is sponsoring or paying for the item to be scanned. This is how the item metadata is displayed in the BHL interface. Item metadata elements include volume information, such as volume number and year for journal items, contributor, sponsor, copyright metadata, and rights holder. As you can see in this image, Volume 7, numbers 1 through 6, are included in this scanned volume, and they were all published in 1981. In order to keep BHL content consistent, it is important to follow the BHL volume metadata standards. The notes listed here about enumeration and chronology give an overview of expectations. For further information, please check out the documentation titled BHL Enumeration and Chronology Standards on the BHL Help Wiki page. This will give you more information and examples to help guide you. BHL uses 5 fields to document copyright metadata. Copyright metadata must be assigned for each book or volume. In other words, copyright metadata is item-level metadata. BHL copyright metadata fields are copyright status, license type, due diligence, rights, and rights holder. BHL recommends standard copyright metadata values depending on the copyright status of the item being digitized. If your institution has already established standards for copyright metadata, then you may use your institution's standard in lieu of the BHL standard. Contact Bianca to map your values. There are 3 different values to choose between for copyright status. They are public domain, no known copyright, and in copyright. For books or volumes where the copyright status is public domain, you only need to worry about the copyright status field. For books or volumes where the copyright status is no known copyright, you need to address 2 fields, the copyright status and due diligence fields. The due diligence field points to a page on our public wiki with more information about these types of materials. For books or volumes where the copyright status is in copyright, you must be careful to enter 4 of the 5 fields. Copyright status, license type, which is a Creative Commons license, rights, which points to a page on our public wiki that lists the copyright holders and the titles for which we have received permission to digitize, and rights holders. Failure to provide proper copyright metadata violates the agreements reached with copyright holders. The third part of the required metadata is page metadata. Similarly to the item-level metadata, page metadata is specific to each individual page that is scanned. This is how the page metadata is displayed in the BHL interface and the corresponding metadata fields. Some examples are the page number, such as page 123, or the page type, such as text, photograph, or illustration. We also have the capacity to include article and segment metadata in BHL. Some BHL researchers want to be able to search for segments within BHL books and journals. This includes book chapters, articles, and so on. This type of searching is enabled only if we have segment metadata, which includes article title, author, page range, and other important data fields. This citation metadata can sometimes be acquired from online sites such as Web of Science or Google Scholar if your publication has been indexed. Ideally, these citations are best provided by the publisher themselves, since they are often more complete and accurate. If you are part of the Expanding Access project and have this data available in a spreadsheet, RIS file, or another format, please email it to enablingAccess.bhl@gmail.com. Do you have further questions about BHL metadata, or would you like links to the mentioned documentation? If so, please email Bianca Crowley for general BHL metadata questions, or Mariah Lewis if you are an Expanding Access contributor.